Thank you so much for joining us. You've written a book talking about turning the future into revenue, what businesses and individuals need to know to shape their futures. How does one go about shaping futures? What methodologies does one use, given the fact that, you know, the global economic situation is so unstable?
Well, every human being has the capacity to remember the past and learn from it, and imagine or dream about or make deliberate decisions about the future. And as a professional futurist, what I do is help organizations take that human capacity and make it more real, make it more active. And the most important thing that you can do to shape the future is, in fact, to imagine the future. One of the things that I say is that the future actually creates the present. If you want to change what your company is doing today, change how it sees the future in terms of something that you'd like to try to create, or something that you'd like to try to avoid, or something that you'd like to try to get ready for. Any of those images of the future will give you clues about things that you should be doing today to be better prepared for the future.
And how does that planning differ from, let's say, when you're dealing with a company or a business, to an individual or a leader of such a business?
Well, it's surprisingly similar, in that individuals too can have images of their own future, a dream, a goal, and work backwards from that dream or goal to see what kind of education I might need, what kind of steps I might need to take in order to achieve that goal. And the very same thing is true for companies. Of course, the scale is very different. Interestingly, I find it easier for companies often to think about their future than it is for individuals, because for individuals it's so important, and so we tend to shy away from it and kind of let nature take its course, when you can be more proactive in shaping the future that you prefer.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, change is about the only certainty that one has. How does one plan, keeping in mind that things change constantly? How do you stay ahead of the change, so to speak?
By making yourself constantly learning. One of the things that we'll say about developing a future image or a future vision is that it ought to change as you move toward it, because the world is going to change. And so you have to agree this is the direction that we want to go, and then put yourself into a constant learning cycle, so you're paying attention to all the environmental signals and all the competitive signals and so on, so that you're willing to change direction ultimately, and willing to change the entire vision if the world changes in a radical way, which of course it may. We can't predict the future perfectly, not even close to that, but we can anticipate it in such a way that we can see more clearly the kinds of things that we ought to be doing now to help shape where we want to go.
We obviously live in a world where technology plays a major role in the pace at which we get information, at how information is disseminated. How important is technology in scenario planning, in the kind of work that you do?
Well, so technology is becoming increasingly important. I'm here in Johannesburg to speak to the SAS South Africa Executive Forum, which is happening this Wednesday. It's a free forum, by the way, and listeners and watchers could come at 8:15 in the morning to, it's called Newtown in Johannesburg, and attend this conference. And the conference is focused on this exploding data that we have. In fact, the term that's being used in the industry is called big data. And we are producing twice as much data every year, a lot of it in social media and other forms of data. And now there are tools being developed by SAS as well as other companies, but SAS is well known for this, to analyze this data in ways that we couldn't before. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a movie that came out a year ago or so ago in the States where I live. It was called Moneyball. It was about the American baseball leagues,
I happen to have seen that movie.
It's a good movie. Brad Pitt is in it, and it's about how a particular general manager of a team decided not just to rely on intuition, but to use data to analyze players, and therefore pick better players and build a better team. The English Premier Leagues are famous now for using data in this way, and every industry is now capable of and being touched by these massive amounts of data, and we're now learning how to tap into that data in ways that can better anticipate the future.
If we're talking about ways to tap into that data, how does one anticipate that the data is consistent except for patterns? Because ultimately, for example, if you're talking about a big baseball team or even a company, it's human behavior which is often erratic.
Well, but human behavior, when it's multiplied by thousands or millions of people, is not as erratic as you think. There come to be very regular patterns. A couple of other examples. Public health officials are discovering that they can actually forecast the onset of flu epidemics several weeks earlier by paying attention to social media, because people began reporting that they're not feeling well. They begin going to reporting they're going to the doctors and so on, and it's ahead of other statistics. There's a program that I've read about in Uganda anticipating the incidences of malaria by tracking social media, by tracking actually text messages of people going to clinics around Uganda looking for anti-malarial medicines, and they're tracking sort of where are the patterns, where is the medicine available, where is it not available, and they're discovering they could be 2 to 4 weeks ahead of what were the traditional reporting methods. And that is just simply tapping into data which is otherwise just out there, but nobody's paying attention to it in an organized way. And now we're developing these tools to pay attention in this organized way.
Let's shift the focus to the African continent, where you don't often have reliable information, where data needs to be double-checked. Now, obviously, in scenario planning, there is margin for error, there is speculation, as you know, it's a big factor. But how do you ensure that that margin is of such a nature that your information can be credible?
Well, the whole game in scenario planning, as it is most typically practiced, is to develop a range of scenarios, typically 3 or 4 different scenarios, that take into account certain uncertainties within each scenario. And that gives you the ability to allow for a little bit of uncertainty with the data. But the bottom line is that the more data is available, the more people are participating in systems and so on, the more reliable this data is going to become. We're at just the beginning of being able to tap into this data. We're really at the start of a world in which data is kind of the new oil. In your newscast, you mentioned some oil discoveries off the coast, or potential oil discoveries off the coast of East Africa. And just as oil is important, or natural gas is important to the future, treating data as a new form of oil is also important to the future, and we're going to learn how to use it more reliably as we go through the next several years.
Now, of course, we know that the world is quite unequal. We look at, skewed trade patterns. What is the potential for the pace at which data is coming at us to increase divisions globally between richer and poorer nations? And how can developing countries use data and use it smartly in a way to kind of close that inequality gap, globally speaking?
Well, I think the last part of your question actually is the key, and that is to come up with deliberate strategies to try to use this data to build better businesses within your own country. The divergence of wealth in the world, and in particular in countries like here in South Africa or now in the United States, which is seeing this increasing divergence of wealth, it's not just a data issue, it's also a values issue, and there have to be some hard values choices made among leadership and among everybody in a country to build a larger middle class. And that's part of the challenge that I like to talk about when I'm in front of audiences, that is a choice that we have to make in order to build a more positive future over the next couple of decades.
Well, I hope you have a really good, interesting conference. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Glen Hiemstra, CEO and founder of thefuturist.com, discussing how to shape the future.